finally on chapter 5 too. That's right.
When I pulled up my phone and looked at where the earthquake occurred, I knew that it was not going to be a good situation. Convoy of Hope is an organization that helps people who have been impacted by a disaster. So we responded thinking through not just the immediate relief, but long-term recovery. Throughout Convoy of Hope, everybody knows that we're going to be responding to the Nepali earthquake. There's this constant conversation that's taking place between the disaster response team, the global program team, and communication. Without collaboration, I think almost everything's a failure for Liberty Week.
I live in South Central. South Central. Liquor store, fast food, vacant lots. So the city planners, they get together and they figure they're gonna change the name South Central to make it represent something else. So they change it to South Los Angeles. Like this is gonna fix what's really going wrong in the city. This is South Los Angeles. Liquor stores, fast food, vacant lots. Just like 26.5 million other Americans, I live in a food desert. South Central Los Angeles, home of the drive-through and the drive-by. Funny thing is, drive-throughs are killing more people than the drive-by. People are dying from curable diseases in South Central Los Angeles. For instance, the obesity rate in my neighborhood is like 5 times higher than, say, Beverly Hills, which is like probably 8-10 miles away. I got tired of seeing this happen. And I wonder, how would you feel if you had no access to healthy food? If every time you walk out your door, you see the ill effects that the present food system have on your neighborhood? I see wheelchairs bought and sold like used cars. I see dialysis centers popping up like Starbucks. And I figured this has to stop. So I figured that the problem is the solution. Food is the problem, and food is the solution. Plus, I got tired of driving 45 minutes round trip to get an apple that wasn't impregnated with pesticides. So what I did, I planted a food forest in front of my house. some strip of land that we call a parkway. It's like 150 feet by like 10 feet. The thing is, it's owned by the city. You have to maintain. So I'm like, cool. I can do whatever the hell I want. It's like, this is my responsibility and I gotta maintain it. This is how I decide to maintain. So me and my group, LA Green Brown, we got together and we started planting my food forest, fruit trees, the whole nine, vegetables. What we do, we're pay it forward kind of group, where it's composed of like gardeners from all walks of life from all over the city. And it's completely volunteer and everything we do is free. And the garden was beautiful. And then somebody complained. The city came down on me, and they basically gave me a cycle saying that I had to remove my garden. They turned into a warrant. I'm like, come on, really? Oh, people land that you could care less about? And I was like, cool, bring it. Because this time it wasn't coming up. So LA Times got hold of it. Steve Lopez did a story on it and talked to the councilman. And one of the Green Grounds members, they put up a petition on change.org. And with 900 signatures, we were a success. We had a victory on our hands. My councilman even called and said how they endorse and love what we're doing. I mean, come on, why wouldn't it? LA leads the United States in vacant lots that the city actually owns. They own 26 square miles of vacant lots. That's 20 Central Parks. That's enough space to plant 725 million tomato plants. Why is that not okay? Growing one plant would give you 1,000, 10,000.
Hey, you guys. Welcome to week 5. You believe that we only have 10 weeks left? It's like, I guess we're like 30% over with, and we're still here. We're still making it. I just wanted to go over chapter 5 and the code of ethics and some of the info contained. The video I was playing ahead, I'm doing more research on not just food deserts, but food forests. So some people cure food deserts by planting a food forest. Ron Finley's a good example of this. He did it in LA. He was showing an example. That's how much vacant land they have, which is probably the same in Cincinnati. And it's like Central Park, I guess, is, I think it's 3 miles by 1 mile. So that would be like three square miles, maybe even 3 miles by a half a mile or a quarter mile. So he's shown that you could have almost 1 billion tomato plants in that space. And just different solutions for different problems that come up. But with the code of ethics, this morning we were just kind of going through what it looks like, how your paper would be this week, and any questions that came up with it. So you guys are the afternoon, so you're number 2. I only put stuff into assignments and discussions. I think only discussions won't show up on like, this is due on the calendar now. So you actually have to go and like click on discussion to be able to do it. So I've left those open so you guys can continue to do those. Some people are accessing from out of town online. So I've left everything open. Yep. Only one. It's possible I didn't add the, okay, which is good. It's possible for your class. So I added the second one into the second class, and I'll add the second one for you guys. So like I said, it'll just be an ongoing thread, and you do have to dig for it to find it. I don't know what's up with these. You ever have your mask fall apart on you? Kind of weird. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're going to do today. September discussion. So, when you go into your paper, and it's not due till Thursday, which is nice, so you still have a couple of days. The first thing you want to do is search up the NASW Code of Ethics. So you want to do a search on that. Save and edit topic. When you do the search, this is usually what comes up, and I want you guys to add in. I'll get you exactly to what it says. So it's only a few pages, and there's your values paper. And we're looking up both the code of ethics and the values. So you search for that. This website will come up with the read the code of ethics. So we'll try to put that here. There's several things we'll go through on the code of ethics, but essentially teaching you how to work with social workers, how to be ethical. And these really would apply to a lot of professions. So your own profession will have a code of ethics. So it helps to get familiarized with this one. So you review the code of ethics, and you're going to write a paper basically comparing and contrasting your personal values with the social work's code of ethics. So you're going to look into and evaluate your own values, things that you think would be easy to do, like maybe it's confidentiality, or maybe it's social justice, working with folks in poverty to empower them. And then also give examples of stuff that might be challenging. So areas that are incompatible. It's only a few pages. An APA, that's 3 pages of content, but you still have cover page on the front and then references at the bottom. So it looks like it's 5 pages. It's only 3 pages of writing. 2 4 pages. So 3 or 4 pages, you'll have a critical analysis. And then these 2 folks give a analysis of like how to make an ethical decision. So if you search these, they'll show like if a question of ethics comes up, is this right or wrong? Yes, no, and it like branches off, and how you come to your final decision on ethics. And then you'll also include the example of one that might be hard for you. That could be, some people use physical touch because they want to be able to hug a client when they've been in a session with them. They want to be able to hug them if they're crying or something of that nature. But that's where I wanted to go through the code here, and it's a little easier as you can click on them. It shows, it covers these at first, what social work is committed to, like social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity and competence. And it'll tell you why we believe those things, like the purpose of it. And then you can pick from both ethical standards and the ethical principles, which, like competence is usually that you've finished college, you got a degree, and you passed a licensure exam. And then some of you guys may not know this, but when you get a license, you have to still do continuing education units. So like every year or 2, your agency will train you on how to stay up to date on the material, like if there's new competency training, if there's a new supervision training. Nowadays, they do use technology. They always start with competence because that's what you guys are getting right now. When you're in school, you're learning how to do the job you want to choose in 3 years. Like you're learning whatever that major is. You're learning how to become self-supporting, like pay for your stuff. Maybe you're taking out student loans now, like I did, to be able to pay for education. It's hard, but it is still doable to get competence. That's something that we all have training for. You also have cultural competence. So depending on the agency where you are, there may be an area like at St. Leo's, we had several Burundian refugees and several Guatemalan refugees. So becoming competent in the area of folks from Burundi, or becoming competent in the area of folks from Guatemala, they're from Chile. A lot of times you'll have a conflict of interest that comes up, and that may be an easy one. Like, say your cousin comes to you for counseling as a social worker. Generally, we have to refer them to another social worker. You don't want to have a dual relationship with somebody, or one of your friends even. They don't want, like, your friend coming in and you're billing for services to see your friend. That's kind of a conflict of interest. It gives some examples. So social workers should not take unfair advantage of any professional relationship or exploit others to further their personal, religious, or political or business interests. Like at some agencies, they had trouble occasionally is they would have social workers bring their clients to their personal church. And the issue was bringing them to their personal church. Now, if your client asks to go, you should be okay. So is that answering some of the stuff for you, or do you have more questions about the?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's fine. I just want to make sure. So those section 1.0, whatever, goes through like social worker and clients. Obviously 1.09, social workers should under no circumstances engage in sexual activities, inappropriate sexual communications through the use of technology or in person. So they've had to update the code of ethics with like Snapchat or texting or like they didn't have those in the past. Or sexual content with current clients, whether such contact is consensual or forced. So even if they're agreeing to do it, again, you're in a position of power. You don't engage with clients or former clients, it says on the last one, because of the potential for harm to the client. If social workers engage in conduct contrary to this prohibition or claim that an exception to this prohibition is warranted because of extraordinary circumstances, it is social workers, not their clients, who assume the full burden of demonstrating that the former client was not exploited, coerced, manipulated, intentionally or unintentionally. So if the board came after you as you dated a client 5 or 10 years later, then it's burden of proving that you didn't force them into that relationship is on you as the social worker. So social workers should not provide clinical services to individual with whom they had a prior sexual relationship. Providing clinical services. So if you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, refer that person to another social worker. Because again, it's that dual relationship conflict of interest, allowing to take, self things out of the game. So providing clinical services to a former partner has the potential to be harmful to the individual and is likely to make it difficult for the social worker and individual to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. Physical contact. Social workers should not engage in physical contact with clients when there's a possibility of psychological harm to the client as a result of the contact, such as cradling or caressing the client. Social workers who engage in appropriate physical contact with clients are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, culturally sensitive boundaries. With sexual harassment, they say you do not sexually harass clients. That includes advances, solicitation, requests for sexual favors, either verbal, written, or electronic physical contact, even derogatory language. So don't use derogatory language in your notes. This is another one that could come up, and it's hard to remember. Like if you're annoyed with a client and you want to write something bad about them, it's best to write what your observation of the incident was rather than making a judgment of them. Because they can ask for your notes at any point in time. Like a client can ask for your notes, or you could be pulled into court with your notes, or things of that nature. So, the interruption of services and referral. So we also refer out, like if, yep.
So you're a social worker, right?
I've heard about them. So luckily it's written and like made clear enough that you don't see it often, you know what I mean? But it does happen, and that's why usually it's like a rule, because somebody made the rule in the first place or broke them. But I've heard about that stuff happening. There's another one later on that is, confidentiality is an easy one to break, even unintentionally. You might forward an email and you could get hacked too. So just like making sure you keep confidential information. Like this one, the unethical conduct of colleagues. So I have again worked with somebody that I heard about. He was saying he was visiting clients and he wrote notes for 4 hours every day, visiting 4 clients, but he actually was not visiting those clients. So he was writing the notes, billing for it, getting paid for being an employee, and he was found out. So you can lose your license. I've also had somebody who like got through the program of recovery and sobriety, he got sober and made amends for doing the same thing. He made an amend to say he billed for services that he never provided because he wanted to like keep his job. So you act like you've seen the people. Again, it's better to talk with your supervisor and say whatever personal issue may be going on that you can't see them than to like make up a note. You know, I guess they call it Medicaid fraud is one of the issues that come up. Social workers' ethical responsibility in practice settings. So it goes from like clients to you as social workers, and then in final place, the practice setting. So getting your supervision once a week, you have supervision until you get your independent license. When you're independently licensed, you don't have to be clinically supervised to sign off on a note. But all of us have a supervisor of some sort, even if it's the board that we answer to in your state capital like Columbus. You also have to get your training hours. So that might be 2 days a year. You have to do 15 hours a year or 30 hours every 2 years. And usually they're kind of fun. Is they'll feed you, they'll pay you for the day, you get trained, you get your hours, and then you go on to the next thing. So usually it's what's that?
Like, do you have somebody that watches you?
Oh, you like sign in, if that's what you're saying. Is that? But you're kind of on your own. Like it depends on the job setting, but like say if you're in like the prison system, you're probably always being watched if that's what you're asking because there's cameras everywhere. If you're doing home visits and stuff, usually you mark your own times and mileage and visits that you've done and you write that out. And then usually once a month, they'll see if you saw. It's usually 20 hours a week. So 80 hours a month. They'll make sure you're at like 78, 79, 80, or 81 hours of seeing people 4 hours a day. And it depends on the agency. So they'll keep up that way once a month. But it's not like when I was working at a food restaurant as a kid growing up and I like mess around for like 2 minutes not paying attention. They're like, get back to work. It's not like that. But they do. I mean, yeah, they know you're productive, seeing your clients. And if not, again, it's like, do I need to take time off because I have personal issues going on? Or am I just like, is it not the type of work that I want? So I'm going somewhere else. And then, yeah, they'll give you this performance evaluation with it. So every 6 months you get a performance evaluation. And that's how you get your raise. Like if you're doing good, say you met your 20 hours a week of seeing clients and writing the notes, they might give you a 1% raise, a 3% raise. So social workers who have responsibility for evaluating the performance of others should fulfill such responsibility in a fair and considerate manner on the basis of clearly stated criteria. So you're not going to get fired right away if you saw only 78 hours of clients that month. They might like talk with you, like how you could be more efficient with your time, how you could be more productive, or how you can write better notes, and then you fix it. So they generally abide by 3 strikes and you're out rule. Like you'll get warned, then you're in trouble, then you could get fired, but usually you hear about it a few times before it happens. Billing. So this is where I've seen the guy that was dishonest. He said, social workers should establish and maintain billing practices that accurately reflect the nature and extent of services provided, and that identify who provided the services in the practice setting. So if it's you start now, it would be 1:16 p.m. And if you finish with the client, usually you bill in increments of 8. So if you only got 8 minutes with them, you could be done at I can't even think of what that is right now. About 125 or something like that. It's best to bill, 8. Medicaid pays you for 15 minutes. 23, Medicaid pays you for 30 minutes, or 38 minutes, they pay you for 45. So whatever half of the 15-minute mark is, they pay you. 53 minutes is like an hour, and that works out. Practicing is you'll see a client, you want to have time for them to get out and leave before the next client comes in. If you're in the office, or if you're driving place to place, have time to go drive or write your notes or whatever you were doing. So that's what the code looks like, and you can write on any of those. Here's what the book says about it. So values and ethics. Here it says values are belief systems and they're defined desired outcomes. Ethics are more concerned with what is right. They're expressed as standards of conduct. So the micro ethics are at your agency, and the macro is like usually policy. So the value base of social work, we have a focus shift. So it's from morality of individuals and clients to moral imperatives of the social work profession, like serving people with dignity and social justice. Here's some of the values that reflects beliefs about our nature of humankind. We want to bring about change when especially change is needed, and then social justice and intrinsic dignity and worth of humans. We were talking about we watched that last week and 2 weeks ago, but then there was also this week I heard, this is a libertarian speaker who brings up good points about the forced sterilization, some of the ethics of the Tuskegee Airmen, and just the first 4 minutes, because she brings up good arguments on both sides. I want you guys to hear.
Hey, Kim, what's on your radar this morning? Well, last week, when Joe Biden unveiled his vaccine mandates for all federal employees and businesses with over 100 employees, he uttered a truth that was really difficult for many of us to hear.
This is not about freedom, personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you. People you work with, people you care about, people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated.
So he says right there, it's not about your freedom. It's necessary to give up your bodily freedom for the greater good, he says. Now, we're all about wanting to protect our loved ones and even ourselves, really. But when the government tells us we need to give up our bodily freedom, with the government's track record, should we automatically believe them? The U.S. government has never been very good at protecting the rights of an individual to control what happens to their own body. There is a long, sordid history. Just going back to the very beginning of our nation, the most egregious control over another person was, of course, slavery. The state wasn't short of any excuses. They claimed slaves were being cared for, clothed, fed, given religion. They claimed they were better off than poor workers in northern factories. And of course, there was the claim that it was a matter of national security because we needed cheap goods. We couldn't rely on the British or any other foreign nation. And the state has been controlling what we can ingest with prohibition on alcohol and nowadays marijuana. We've been told it's for our own good to keep us from becoming addicts. And they would also claim that it isn't our right to be inebriated in public places. Who we can love has been regulated by the state. Interracial and gay marriage has been illegal at times in our nation's history.
So did you guys know that interracial marriage was illegal up until 1969? Like, it is that case Loving versus the state of Virginia. That just blew my mind. I was born in the 70s, so that was like either 69 or 71 that case was decided. So that just was shocking. It's been within the last generation.
The excuse has always been that it's against nature, that genes shouldn't mix, or that it will corrupt the youth. People actually argued that being gay was contagious. Now, of course, a woman's right to choose has long also been under attack and still is today. Contraception was even once illegal. And of course, abortion is currently becoming less accessible in southern states. And the excuse is always to preserve life, or in the case of contraception, to not interfere in God's plan. Now, ironically, sterilization of young women was popular in the early 1900s and even up until the 70s. We talk about interfering with God's creations. Anyone who was institutionalized or considered less than in society could undergo forced sterilization. And the justification was to protect them from having children they couldn't care for and to protect society from people breeding who shouldn't be breeding. This eugenics movement lasted for decades and mostly affected poor women of color. In fact, the 1927 SCOTUS ruling that allowed for forced sterilization was particularly egregious. In Buck versus Bell, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote in his opinion, quote, "Society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes." Jacobson versus Massachusetts. "3 generations of imbeciles are enough," he wrote. So he cited Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the Supreme Court ruling in 1905 that found mandatory vaccinations were not in violation of the Constitution. That case involved a man named Henning Jacobson who refused the vaccine, claiming that he and his son had bad reactions in the past. And as a result, he was charged $5, which was the penalty in Massachusetts for not complying. Now, he took the case to court and he lost. The court ruled public health officials could do whatever they felt necessary to protect the public, which apparently later forced sterilization was considered part of that protection. And Jacobson versus Massachusetts is often being cited right now as a justification for why current vaccine mandates can hold. But we really need to put this ruling into context of the time period. I mean, we're talking about a time when women could not vote, contraception and interracial marriage were crimes, Jim Crow laws were in effect. Also at the same time, activists were trying for labor and wage reforms unsuccessfully. SCOTUS during this time was striking down laws that guaranteed minimum wage for women. They failed to uphold the law to prevent employers from demanding 60-hour work weeks, and they struck down a federal law regulating child labor. So it really, was it really the early, it was really clear in the early 1900s, and really you could from the founding of the nation and even to today, that a free country has always been about a free enterprise, not really about a free people. And when you look at all of these past and current attempts to control another person's body, you will see that the poor are the most affected.
So if you want to see more of her, this is a libertarian thinker that kind of goes to the ethics of the forced sterilization, some of the opinions that came out, and what has formed our laws from the SCOTUS, she calls it, Supreme Court of the United States, and how those ethics have now kind of been displayed currently and on really as recent as this week. So that was one. Her name is Kim Iverson, so she's a libertarian. I know if I play any more, it'll give me a copyright strike. We only get a few minutes on there. So the value context of social work, we have to consider all of these. So we're looking at value system of society, you have a value system of the profession, you have a value system of the agency, and a value system of the client. Your client brings in their own values. When you see a client, they might have their own thoughts. And as a social worker yourself, you have your own opinions and values that come into play here. So we're balancing all of these. And this picture comes back in kind of similar to this, the systems theory, where you've got client system, the problem, where they come to see the social worker. It's all within the agency context and even some of the social, political, and cultural context. So we have to keep all of those in consideration when we're making a ethical decision. Some of them seem very straightforward, and some of them can be hard to decide upon. So the purpose of having ethics, we prescribe expectations for professional conduct. So it tells you what to do as a professional, like that you can't steal from your clients, you can't rob them, beat them up, exploit them in any way. It helps guide decision making. It provides a standard for assessing competence, which we all get in school and higher education. And then after you graduate, if you get a license, you'll take different classes to keep your license also. It regulates professional behavior and it helps evaluate your professional performance. And then the NASW Social Work Code of Ethics is defined 3 that we went through to your clients first. So, what is your ethical responsibility to people you work with that are paying you for services, to colleagues, people you work next to, and then your practice settings, like the agency that hires you. So, they kind of describe in detail there. You can look up any social worker who has been given a strike or lost their license for not following any of these. Sometimes they make you lose your license for a year or 2. Sometimes you can lose it for an extended period of time, depending on what the infraction is. And now they're kind of starting getting into our next paper, but the Code of Ethics, again, covers those 3 areas as professionals, to the social work profession, to the broader society. Our next paper is on international social workers, International Federation of Social Work, and even how we have some ethics that go overseas. So I wanted to kind of introduce that. That paper obviously wouldn't be due till the end of the month, so like September 29th or September 30th. That's the 3rd one, along with a discussion. But at this time, I wanted to see if you guys had any questions for the ethics paper and how to do it and how to proceed and cover what you have to.
Let's do it 11. I mean, it's going Thursday.
Right. Yeah. Usually I think it's auto set for midnight. So you got till midnight Thursday.
3 pages.
3 pages is the recommended. You could go 4 or 5. You have more to write. It's up to you. And then sometimes we get overwhelmed by like the page length, but just covering the material. If you can cover it in 3, that's the minimum. But if you need to take 4 or 5, that's okay too.
3 including the list with the name.
Right. So yeah, it's 3 content, and then APA you have a title page, and then you have your references.
So at least 1.
Well, no. So
The
it would
actual
be
text.
5. So you're right. It's yeah, because you have your title page, which is just like a blank and has your name and university and date, and then the 3 pages of content, and then at the bottom would be references. Did you have a question?
All right, so my bad, but what is it?
So here is where you go to find it. You go into the social work assignments, and then it is the values paper, and it's over the Code of Ethics. It's called the NASW Code of Ethics. Are you able to access D2L?
Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, you'll go in, then you can just search. If you want play by play, you just go in, do a search, NASW Code of Ethics. And then usually it takes you right here. You have the whole code. You read through the code, and then if you wanted articles, you could go to, about the Code of Ethics. You can go to Scholar and look them up. So you could just do NASW Code of Ethics, and you can cite papers from here. And you could even do modern day papers. So like anything in the past 5 years, you quote it that way. You just hit the quotes, and then there's APA right there on the second one. You could even download the papers you're using. So there's one too. So yeah, there's an article from the NASW code and stuff that you can cite. So it's just having us think of how we want to be as professionals, because it's different. Like we're learning how to be professionals. And I know some of you have other professions you've chosen. What are the other professions we have in here, or majors that you guys are going for? Business, finance, biology. So you'll have your own code of ethics, like there's actually bioethics is one of the hardest ethics to understand, but you'll see some of those. A lot of times in biology, it'll be like, there's one kidney, you got this dude who's an alcoholic, but he's got a family of 5, and you got this dude who's like a single man but young and getting sober, and you've got this dude, who do you give the kidney to? Stuff like that. Bioethics becomes super complicated. Luckily in social work, we don't have that as often. Business ethics, there's a ton of lists of ethics that you follow in your business career that, not taking advantage of people ultimately. You see that all the time in the news, and then even in accounting and finance, you find ways they call it cooking the books, I guess. If you cook the books, you find ways to like put a little over here, put a little, and that would be considered unethical, so to speak. So, so any questions on those? Okay, that's good. I also had, so in my class after this, we were actually watching stuff on the still face with moms. And somebody in my class this morning asked me if I ever done this on my kids. And I was like, actually, no, as I feel bad and messed up to do this. But I have a friend who's messed up like that, and he did still face. So they have a video of still face with dads, and it just kind of shows like at a young age, and this is getting us into other areas of social work, but like working with children, trauma, and then ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, and like how those all are affected at a super young age. You think at like 1, 2, and 3, we don't remember much, but what was your all's first memory, if you remember your first memory? How old were you? 3? Do you remember what it was? Oh, that's a good one. Usually it's like a dramatic one like that. Like I was 3, and it's because my parents said they took away my pacifier and threw it to the raccoons at the Cincinnati Zoo. I was pissed. I was pissed enough, I think they said they gave it back to me, and it probably should have shown them that I was like kind of orally fixated. As I smoked for 10 years, and I couldn't quit smoking until I started chewing on these things, and I haven't smoked in like 20 years. Anybody else with a memory that you have from a young, how old are you at least? 4? You remember what it was?
I had passed out at school.
So yeah, it's usually like sometimes a trauma. For me, I lost the passy and it was a trauma or like that or on stage. Anybody else? You don't have to share, but yeah.
13. I got hit with a door and I had to get stitches.
Okay. See, yeah. And then you were 1? 1? For real? That's pretty young. So what do you remember? Did you have to go to like the hospital? Okay, yeah. That's impressive. Yeah, it's mostly you don't remember them until about 2, 3, or 4. So I guess I'm leading into like the effect we have with kids we work with, our children. I don't know if any of you guys have nieces or nephews or even like younger kids in your family. They notice immediately when we're distracted texting. I'll try to like sneak off a text with my kids and they notice it right away and they like flip out. And with the heroin epidemic or even alcoholism around here, if say you're passed out, the kid notices immediately, maybe even within a minute or 2. Or if you're on heroin and you nod off for 3 hours, it affects the brain development ultimately. So that's often when there could be an ethics concern raised, and then Child Protective Services goes in, helps you get the rehab you need, and the kid is taken care of. Then ideally, the family's reunified when like the recovery's over. But here's some examples of the still face with dads. They did this with moms at first, but they've done some with dads. Same type of reaction. They know right away when you're distracted, texting, like trying to do something else.
What we've learned over the years is that babies are much more capable than we initially imagined, but they're also much more vulnerable. And in Edtronic still face experiment, we get to see both in a very short period. We see the baby and dad playing together in their routines. There are things that they know about each other and things that they do together, and it's fun. Then we ask the dad to turn away. And when he turns back, to keep his face completely still and not respond to the baby. And the results are almost immediate, and they're devastating. The baby looks to the dad and tries to get the dad to get back into those games. Hey, we were just playing just a minute ago, weren't we? We were having fun. What's going on? And then the baby starts to get frustrated when that doesn't work. So she'll have to look away, look around the room and find something else, and then look back and say, now can we play? And within 3 minutes, the baby has really dissolved. She is trying to get out of the chair. She's uncomfortable. She's reaching out to dad, crying. And then we ask the dad to turn away again. And when he turns back, to go back to being regular dad. And it's a joyous reunion. They get back into their routines, the things that they do together, the things that they were just doing 3 minutes before. And the baby settles down and gets back to the comfort zone that she's developed with the dad. What we see in the still face experiment is how able the child is to initiate and be part of the relationship between the father and the child, but also how much she depends on that relationship in order to keep an even keel. And when she's grounded and comfortable, she can explore the world. She can meet new people. She can try new things. And she's got that safe place that she can always rely on. And there's a trust level there. We can only begin to imagine what it's like for babies whose life is like that 3 minutes all of the time. And they don't get that responsiveness, and they don't get any help getting back to an even keel. And the results can be very tragic. They can have trouble trusting people, they can have trouble relating to people, and they can have trouble being calm enough so that they can explore the world and take part in the world.
So those 3 points are kind of important, just that even as early as childhood, we learn to trust. We learn that we're going to be taken care of. We learn we're going to be fed. And if, for whatever reason, the person that is taking care of us is overwhelmed even, so sometimes it's not their fault, but it could be an addiction problem, which obviously is a mental health issue, and they need help recovering from that addiction, overdosed, or passed out from alcohol and you're not fed, learning the trust can't be there, or not being able to get out into the world long enough without overreacting to explore the world. So the importance of engaging and finding ways to care for the children. Sometimes, as I mentioned, maybe they're overwhelmed. The parents have to have 2, 3, or 4 jobs to pay for just the basic circumstances of how the family lives and how the baby lives. So that's some of the stuff to consider with child development. And these things are carried on. They're not like forever damaged. You can actually, with ACEs, which mean adverse childhood experiences, if you have some of the ACEs growing up, they can be fixed and undone with therapy.
So we know that those initial relationships, that initial responsiveness and interaction between the father and the baby are keys to the baby's success as a child and as an adult.
So there is a lot of about building connections. Also working with kids. We have a high incidence in Cincinnati of sudden infant death syndrome. So they also have ABC, stands for sleeping alone on their back in the crib. They have a lot of acronyms with those. They even added the D on there, alone, back in crib, and then D is don't smoke, because if they don't get enough oxygen, they can't breathe properly. And some of those challenges come across. So you guys have already watched the Tuskegee stuff. The last piece I had for you was about, I was trying to find the shorter one. We started with that, but the Ron Finley video and what he's done in the community.
Okay, so I haven't seen a lot of ads lately telling me to refinance, so I got.
Stories of people against all parts, get some if you help me. This is the story of a man who changed the perception of urban spaces with only a seed.
We're in an area where I have kids that tell me that they don't dream. How do you not dream? It's free. So now we have to teach people how to dream because they live in these areas that don't have an opportunity. People are well, you're giving people hope. I like to say hope, because you can't do nothing but hope. But guess what you can do with opportunity? I'm Ron Finley. Some people call me the gangster gardener. Some people call me the renegade gardener.
He's real, really real. He's a very kind man, and the man works hard. Good night.
The depression of '08 hit my business really, really bad. I went to a grocery store in my neighborhood, and I'll never forget there was a tomato that says maybe coated with shellac. Shellac was the stuff we put on our wood in wood shop. And then I would go to other areas and see the difference. I'm like, okay, well, what's the difference? Why can't we have the same thing? And it just let me know that all of this was by design. And my whole thing was, okay, we need to change the design. And I thought to change with my garden, start growing my own food. Parkway in Los Angeles is that strip of land right before you get to the street. So it's between the street and the sidewalk. You actually own it, but the city has jurisdiction over it. I originally got a citation once I put a garden out there. So for years, I just let it go. Trash, weeds, I didn't care. And I never got a citation. But as soon as I tried to beautify it, I got a warrant for my arrest. This time I'm like, I'm not taking it out. This is too positive of a thing. If you have a problem with it, why don't you try redesigning these communities where they uplift people rather than keep them down? And I figured it was time that this was changed because you didn't even get a recognition that this had trash and litter and dressers and toilets on it. But I beautify it and now you have a problem with it. So what does that tell me about you're thinking about me and my neighborhood?
That's the dude's stubbornness. He doesn't give up when he feels it's right.
Steve Lopez of the LA Times did a visiting interview. It was like the clouds clear. My whole thing was just imagine if the neighbors had done it collectively. So now you're exchanging food. You create a responsibility and you create a relationship in a community. If somebody writes a law, that means they can tear it up and get an eraser and rewrite it. Gardener, that's gangster. Being educated, that's gangster. Building your community, that's gangster to me. So these are the kind of messages to me that these people need to hear. Urban gardening helps with the redesign in a multitude of ways. It's not just about the food again, it's about people. Now you're engaging communities. Now your people are growing and they're participating in their food. They have skin in the game. The air is better. You're changing the biodiversity of the soil in your neighborhood. You're bringing in pollinators, you're bringing in bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. You're changing the ecosystem when you put in a garden. We are part of the ecosystem. So that garden is changing us. And then the beauty factor. You get to walk out your door and experience nature every day. It's gonna change you. I don't care how jaded you are.
From our charter schools, that's right here on the cuts, right here on Jefferson Park, to people just meandering through the neighborhood, people that specifically want to come and see the garden. He's created a consciousness globally. as well as locally?
I probably planted 15 to 20 property gardens all in Illinois.
Do you consider yourself to be a
No, that I'm underdog by no means. I'm super dog.
well, you went up against like an institution.
But no, they went up against me.
So yeah, I don't know if any of you guys in your neighborhoods have had any gardens going up in the past 10 years. Any exposure to them? It's funny because it's a revolutionary idea now, but it's what we've ate for millennia. Like that's how we got our food forever, and we just got brought away from the system that I buy it at Kroger's, and it is easier to get it there, but the amount of energy contained in like growing it, shipping it across the country, keeping it cool and hydrated and fresh until I buy it on that store shelf, whereas I grow mine with like a penny seed outside. It does take work and labor, but there's a whole movement going on with some of the urban gardening, especially in Detroit. We've seen some of those, and Cincinnati and folks that I like at the end he does finish with that they went up against him as they cited him initially. He's not doing extraordinary idea. It's something that's been natural to our humankind for millennia. He just happened to get a citation for it, but if he was able to grow food, they were okay with trash being laid around, or he said toilets and dressers sitting on the curb. But the moment you clean it up and grow a garden, they're like, whoa, hold on, you're not staying within the lines. You gotta stay within your lines there. So, any other questions about the papers? We're going to do these last few slides actually at the end of the week because it's getting into the next paper on international social work. That's all I've got. I'll stick around for questions if you guys have them, but that's all I have for today. Yeah, sure. Here it is. I always forget. Thank you for reminding me. Hello. Mm-hmm.
You can pull it up.
Oh, yeah. Right here.
Okay, so let's say I say discrimination. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna say like explain my views on discrimination and then explain like the code's views on it.
Correct.
And then like take the similarities and differences.
Correct. Yeah. One you think would be easier for you to do, and then maybe there's one here that you think would be more of a challenge, but you could do that because there's always going to be a few of them.
Okay, so I just go through and explain it. Is it like a certain amount of numbers that I have to do? I have to do like 5.
You can do a few of ones that make sense and vibe with you, and just maybe at least one that you don't think would be easy to do, which is fine.
Okay. Thank you.
For sure.
I was thinking, can I do like my title and then for the first page I would do like what the NSAW code is and facts about that and stuff. And my second page would be like about my personal
Like ones that you think would be easy for you to do.
yeah, and then my last page would be like the comparing contrast like between both.
Yeah, and the ones that might be hard for you to do.
Yeah. And then the last page would be like the website I started from.
Oh yeah, your references. Correct. Yep. It says references and then how to cite an APA. Correct. Yep. That would work. And that. Make sure my computer doesn't die.